How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tzadi, Daf 90. It's kind of like a not minor. I feel like it's a kind of milestone. 90. It's like almost like a stone's throw away from Kuf, and Kuf, generally speaking, is like the big dramatic turning point in a Masechta when the end is like mamish in sight. The exception, of course, being Masechta Zvachim. Masechta Zvachim was so darn hard and shocking that I couldn't, until I think it was over, I think I didn't even realize that I finished. But it feels like we're getting close. Daf Tzadi. That's a Daf Tzadi. The next milestone is going to be Daf Kuf, and then Kuf Yud. And then we'll be moving on to Chulin. But exciting stuff. Today's a Gavaldik Daf. It's mamash right before Shabbos. Shabbos starts in about an hour. I need to record, edit, upload. A lot to do. So we'll see how far I get. Sheesh. Why do I have a feeling I'm only going to get up to the Mishnah on Daf Tzadi Amud Beis? That's what I feel. But also, I don't have the typical slides, everything. I was like, mamash just rushing because I need to. I'm running against the clock. So anyways, we have two Mishnayos essentially on today's daf. I don't know that I'm going to get to the second one. We'll have to see. I actually have a feeling that I'm actually not going to, which means tomorrow's daf is going to be quite the daf. It's probably going to be a big old daf, but I think that that's just what we're going to have to do. Yesterday was quite the daf as well. But anyways, we'll see how far we get. Anyways, the first Mishnah talks about, shows I didn't really have time to. Usually I sit down before I record and I kind of go over everything and organize it and like what's the first section. But essentially the main thing of the first Mishnah is talking about I don't even want to say. It's a little bit technical. I would have had to have thought it down. But measures and things measures being Mekadesh, different things, essentially. Different things being Mekadesh and measures. Sorry, it's not a great explanation. But the next Mishnah is interesting because it talks about Nisachim. Which korbanos require Nisachim? We've of course been discussing about Nisachim all the time, right? All the time we talk about Nisachim. But now we're mamish getting to a Mishnah which talks about these are the korbanos that require Nisachim. These are the ones that don't. We'll see if we get there. No promises. But if things move quickly, I don't know that they will, but if they do, then we will get to that Mishnah as well. Otherwise, we will get to it tomorrow. Okay, now to begin with the Mishnah that I couldn't tell you what it talks about, though I can definitely explain what it talks about. We are on Daf Tzadi Amud Aleph at the Mishnah, about 5 or 8 or so lines into the Amud. Daf Tzadi Amud Aleph says the Mishnah, Kol midas sheba mikdash hayu nigdashos. Interesting. All of the measures in the Beis Hamikdash, were heaping measures. Chutz mishel kohen gadol. Sound familiar? The exception being the measure of the high priest, shoya godsha bisocha, it was not heaping. Its heap was in the vessel itself, i.e., it didn't heap whatever would heap. Right? Essentially, let's just cut straight through it. We saw machlek. I'm going to give away the Gemara. No big deal. We saw the other day a Gemara. Machlek is between, or probably honestly a Mishnah. Machlek is between. Right, must have been a Mishnah. Machlek is between the Chachamim and what was it? Sheva? Yeah, right. Yeah, of course. The Mishnah. Yeah, better. The first Mishnah in the parak. So we saw Machlek is in the Mishnah to Reb Meir and the Chachamim. Reb Meir had said that there are two isaruns in the Beis Hamikdash. One of them is a smaller isarun that you would heap, and the other one was a larger isarun that you wouldn't heap. And meaning the larger one was kilu a full isar, and you fill it up and you have a full isar. The other one was a smaller one, so you had to heap it. Both of them were an isarun, but one, in order to get the isarun, you had to heap it. The other one, you just, the full measure was an isarun. So what we're saying here is that we're going to ask in the Gemara, what does it mean that all of the measures, essentially there were just two, but we're saying that all of the measures in the Beis Hamikdash were heaped, with the exception being the measure of the Kohen Gadol, which wasn't heaped, because its heap was just essentially its contents. Okay. So, says the Mishnah, Kol midosh b'mikdash, again, all of the measures in the Mikdash hayu nigdashos, they were heaped, like Reb Meir says. Chutz mishal Kohen Gadol, but not the essentially isarun of the Kohen Gadol, shaya gocha bisocha, because the measure of the Kohen Gadol was whatever whatever was contained in the heap of the smaller measures is simply included in the measure of the Kohen Gadol. It was not heaped. You would flatten it out. You would even it out. Now, midas alach beutzein kodesh umidas ayavesh beutzein chol. Okay. So when it comes to moist measures, when it comes to liquid measures, beutzein kodesh. Their beutzein is kodesh. What are their beutzein? It's a big machlekes. So I had initially learned this Mishnah, learned the Gemara, based on Rashi. When I say Rashi, I mean, I'm referring to the Rashi manuscript. We only have 4 more days of the double Rashi, of the split Rashi. So I was learning, my preference has been to learn the Gemara with the Rashi manuscript, but you really do need to incorporate elements from the top Rashi as well. Anyways, the way that the Rashi manuscript, which I was initially learning with, but I had a little bit of trouble with it in the Hemshech of the Gemara, but the way that the Rashi manuscript learns this concept of Beirutzin is it's essentially surface tension, if I remember my 9th grade biology correctly. Surface tension. I think it's surface tension. Let me. I should have probably done this beforehand, but surface tension. So I think that's what surface tension is. Timunot. I don't know. I think that's what surface tension is. It's the thing that like it can go up. Is it not that like? Yeah, I think it's that things can go above, right? The rim. Akoponim. So let's say that surface tension is that if you fill up a cup, okay, and it kind of, you could fill up a cup like mamish up to the top with water, and it will heap over like just a bit, right? Or alternatively, you could fill up, if let's say you have a 1 cup measuring cup and you fill it up with flour, you could also obviously heap that, add more flour onto it, right? So if we're talking about liquid measures, we're talking about where there's going to be a little bit of surface tension, which just in case it isn't this, I'm saying what it is for our purposes is that it kind of goes above the lip of the vessel a little bit. And for like flour, it would mean that you can kind of like pile it up above the lip of the measuring cup. So that is. So now, obviously, a minute ago we were talking about heaping measures. So essentially, it's essentially the heap. Okay, the Beirutzin is the heap. So according to that explanation, what it's saying is that midas alach Beirutzin kodesh, that the heap of a liquid measure is holy. Umidas hayavish Beirutzin chol, whereas the heap of a dry measure, its heap is not kodesh, is not holy. However, the Rashi on top explains it differently. He says what it means, and this is important. He says, he defines it that the overflow, that when you fill up a vessel, right, especially because we're saying that with the exception of the Kohen Gadol, all of the vessels in the Beis Hamikdash were heaping vessels. And whatever, let's say, liquid, when you scoop up some oil or some wine, whatever liquid falls over the side of it and lands on the floor or in some other vessel or something like that. Alternatively, any flour that falls over the sides. So that's what we're talking about. And the Rambam learns it that way as well. So and that's actually how I prefer to learn it, and that's how I'm going to be learning it. I'm going to be explaining it that way, particularly because it's going to make it easier, at least for me, to understand a Gemara later on towards the bottom of the Amud. Now, so based on that, let's read the Mishnah. Midas halach, that when it comes to liquid measures, beirutzein, their overflow, kodesh, is kodesh. We're going to explain why in the Gemara. Umidas hayavesh, beirutzein chol. But when it comes to dry measures, their overflow, their whatever falls over, their overflow is not kodesh. I need a drink, excuse me. Their overflow is not kodesh. It's chol. Sheesh. This cough or whatever it is stuck with me for a while. I don't know. I'll tell you. No, I'm not going to tell you anything. All right. Let's go weiter. So fine. Beirutzein chol. Rabbi Kiva Omer, says Rabbi Kiva, midas halach kodesh. Rabbi Kiva says that midas halach kodesh. Okay. So Rabbi Kiva says that because the midas halach, because the liquid measure is kodesh. Lefichach beutzein kodesh. Therefore, its overflow is also kodesh. Again, the Gemara is going to explain this. Midas hayavesh chol lefichach beutzein chol. The dry measure itself, the measuring cup itself, is not holy, it's chol, and therefore its overflow is not holy either. Now, in terms of what's actually in the vessel, however, it will be kodesh because a person was intended for it to be kodesh. He was makdish it. He was makdish whatever goes in the vessel. He was makdish it, so therefore it's kodesh. But anything that overflows, he didn't intend to be makdish that, and the vessel is not going to be makdish it, mikadesh it either. Rabbi Yossi Omer, and says Rabbi Yossi, lo mishum zeh, this is not the reason. Ella shalach neker vayavish enu neker, but because the liquid, because the liquids are ne'ekar and the dries are not ne'ekar. We'll explain that in the Gemara. Sheesh. Oh boy. Yeah, I knew this was going to be a little tricky. That you see, this is why I was struggling to explain what this Mishnah talks about on the fly. I would have had to sat down for a minute and think about how to explain what we just experienced. But basically, we're talking about these measures in the Beis Hamikdash that, with the exception of the Kohen Gadol, the measures are heaping. And what happens when the liquids overflow, when the dries overflow? We saw 3 different opinions in the Mishnah: the Tanna Kama, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yossi. What happens if it's a liquid overflow, a dry overflow? What are the differences? The Gemara is going to explain it. Money. Now the Gemara starts off by asking, who is the author of our Mishnah? Reb Meir. If it's Reb Meir, who in the first Mishnah of our Perek discussed the concept of a heaping of a heaping isaron, ha echad gadush hava. If it's Reb Meir said that there's literally just 2 measures. One of them was you would, what was it called? There was the heaping, and then there was the chaluk, right? The flat one, the one that you flatten out. So there were just 2 measures, right? Meaning our Mishnah over here says kol midosh mikdash, all the millions of different measuring cups in the mikdash. What do you mean millions? There was 2. There was the gadush and there was the chaluk. The heaping one, the smaller heaping one, and the larger one that you fill up. Not all of them. There was 2 of them. Chad gadush. One of them was the heaping one. Not all of the heaping measures. There's 1 heaping measure according to a mayor. If it's a rabbi's chada umachu kava. According to the rabbis, it's even more gefährlich in terms of trying to figure out who it is, because they say there was literally only 1 isaron, and that was the smooth one, not the heaping one. Rav Chisda says Reb Meir that the Mishnah is in fact authored by Reb Meir. Umay kol midos kol medidos. Doesn't mean all of the measuring cups. You're right. There was only 1 heaping measuring cup, but right, that was the heaping yisaron. But all of the measuring that was done in the Beis Hamikdash was always done with the heaping one, right? Because we said it was according to Reb Meir, everything was done, right? We learned in a brisa at the very beginning of the perek. What do we say in the brisa? What perek is this? 10th perek? No. What do we say at the brisa at the very beginning of the 10th perek? Right. Hi, Reb Meir. Omer Mata Yisar Nisan Lekavs Milam Shtei So to say because Echa Gadu Shabo Haya Modid L'Chol HaMenachos Machuk Shabo Haya Modid L'Chavite Kohen Gadol. The machuk was only for the Kohen Gadol, but everything else was with the heaping. Yisar, and therefore all of the measurements that happened all the measuring in the Beis Hamikdash, that's what they call medidos. All of the measuring was always done with the heaping Yisar and not the exact Yisar. Okay, so Reb Meir is the author of our Mishnah. Midas halach beirutzein kodesh. Okay, now getting into that 3-way machlokes in the Mishnah about the heaping, the overflowing liquids, the overflowing dried goods. What is the machlokes all about? Here is what it's all about. Tanna Kama holds midas halach, that the liquid measure nimshicha bein mi bifnim bein mi bachutz, that the liquid measure, which I guess is like the log and that kind of stuff, is what was nimshcha, was anointed, was made kadosh. Bein mi bifnim, bein mi bachutz. It was anointed on the inside of it and the outside of it. Therefore, whatever wine or oil is inside the vessel, as well as whatever overflows and flows down the outside of the vessel, all of it is going to be kadosh. Whereas midas yavesh nimshecha mi bifnim v'lo nimshecha mi bachutz. However, lefi the Tanna Kama, according to Tanna Kama, the dry measures, however, the isaron, was anointed on the inside, but not on the outside. And then, therefore, while the contents are going to be kodesh, but the overflow that didn't go in the vessel and just overflowed over the side of the vessel are not kadosh, because the side is not going to make it kadosh. The sides are not, right, overflowing over the sides. The outside was not anointed. Rabbi Kiva Savar, Rabbi Kiva's opinion is, Midas alach nimshcha be'mi b'fnim be'mi b'chutz. Rabbi Kiva agrees with the Tanna Kama that the liquid measure was anointed on the inside and on the outside, and therefore any liquid overflow becomes kadosh. Midas yavesh, he disagrees with the Tanna Kama, and he holds, Rabbi Kiva holds that when it comes to the Midas yavesh, the isaron, lo nimshcha kol ikar, was not anointed whatsoever. And that is why any overflow is not kadosh. And whatever is in the vessel, as I mentioned earlier, is only kadosh because the person designated it to be kadosh. He said, I'm going to use you, let's say I'm going to use you as flour for a mincha. That's what makes it kadosh, but not the vessel. For Rabbi Yossi, so Rabbi Yossi is the most interesting opinion, in my opinion, which I did not explain Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah. I just said I'll explain it now, after I take a sip of water. So Rabbi Yossi's opinion is, Idi ve'idi nimshcha mi b'fnim v'lo nimshcha mi b'chutz. According to Rabbi Yossi, both the liquid measure and the dry measure were anointed inside, but not outside. Okay, so if that's the case, I understand why the dry measure would not be kadosh. But why would the liquid measure be kadosh if the outside was not anointed? So hacha ainu time, here's the reason why delach. The reason why is delach ne'ekar umigava demona kaasi vayavish einu ne'ekar. Period. Interesting. It's a I guess a physics thing or whatever. That when you have a cup, okay, if you have a cup and you fill up the cup and it's full, and now you pour more water into it. So the water that you pour into the cup is going to go to the bottom of the cup and displace water that was already in the cup. And what's the water that's going to overflow the sides? Water from within the cup. The new water is going to go to the bottom, displacing existing water from the cup, and existing water is what's going to overflow. Which means that therefore, even though the outside of both the liquid and dry measures, according to Rabbi Yossi, the inside was anointed, the outside was not. However, what overflows from the liquid measure is going to be kadosh, because whatever's overflowing from the liquid measure was coming from within the cup. And therefore, it is kadosh. However, by dry measures, if you take like a measuring cup and you fill it up with flour, and then you keep filling it up, even once it's full, you keep filling it up, what's going to overflow on the sides? The new flour. Whatever's packed into the cup is already packed in. It's the new stuff that's going to overflow. And that stuff was not kadosh because the sides of the dry measure were not kadosh. Very, very interesting. Now, frag the Gemara, one second. So what? That's the Gemara's question. The Gemara says, so what? So what that the liquids that overflow came from within the vessel? So what? Gavra, where am I? The person who's bringing, who's measuring out the the oil or the wine. He has intention for what he needs. I don't care that whatever overflowed was in the vessel before. I don't need it. I only need the stuff in the vessel. That this therefore is indicating Kleisharis mikachin shalomidas, that a Kleisharis then is mikadesh even without intention. I have a Kleisharis, meaning sure, enochinami, whatever overflowed was what was in the vessel before. But there's a question of just because something goes in a Kleisharis, does that make it automatically kadosh? What if I had no intention for it to become kadosh? Does it still become kadosh? Well, the implication here seems to be yes. That even though I had no intention for the overflow to be kadosh, it nonetheless is kadosh once it was in a klisharis. So it sounds like we're saying that a klisharis is mekadesh, even shalom midas, without intention. Ravina Amar la'olam eimalach klisharis ein mekadeshin ela midas. Ravina says no. A klisharis is mekadesh only with intention. Only if one intends to be mekadesh with the klisharis does it become kadosh. And therefore, based on that, in principle, only that which is in the vessel should be kadosh. The overflow should not be kadosh. However, the gezerah, we make a gezerah shema yomru, lest people say motzin mi klesharis lechol. That something that was in a klesharis, we can now use it. We can somehow use it for non-holy things, right? If we were to say that only what's in the vessel becomes holy, and whatever overflows is not holy, because klesharis emikachin elamidas, you had no intention, therefore it's not holy. Now do whatever you want with it. People are going to think that things that were in a klesharis could become chol, which is not true. So therefore, as a gezerah, we say that whatever overflows is going to be kadosh nonetheless. The Rambam, if I understand correctly, I think the Rambam, I'd have to look at the Rambam again just to be sure, but I think the Rambam might even apply this not just to the liquids, but to the dry as well, that the gezerah would still apply even to the dries, that we don't want people to get the wrong idea from the dries as well, that any overflow from the dries as well, if we allow people to use it for chulin, then, because the Rambam, I think so, because the Rambam paskins like the Chachamim, like the first Shita, and therefore, meaning it's not specifically going to Rabbi Yossi necessarily, and right, the Rambam says that, and even though, in order to be Mekadesh, you'd have to have intention for it, still, because of this Gezerah, we say that anything that, I think he applies it to the flour as well, that anything at the end of the day that overflows would be kadosh out of this concern that people might get the wrong idea and think that things that from a klisheris can become chol. We'd have to look at the Rambam again. I don't have time, and I also don't have the Rambam in front of me. But I think the Rambam, based on that gezerah, applies it not just to liquid but also dry, and I think that makes sense. Now, Frag the Gemara, most of Abzer, however, asks a question. If that's the case, that we make this gezerah, that we don't want people to get the wrong idea, we have a Mishnah from Daf Kuf that we're going to learn in a week and a half. And that Mishnah is discussing the Lechem Aponim. Now, the Lechem Aponim was switched every Shabbos. Every Shabbos, the Lechem Aponim that was in the Shulchan from the previous Shabbos and in the Heichal all week, remaining fresh, the following Shabbos was swapped out for new Lechem Aponim, and the previous Lechem Aponim was enjoyed by the Kohanim. Now, what if, for whatever reason, says the Mishnah that we're quoting, but what if, for whatever reason, they only were able to replace the Lechem Aponim and the Baziche Levona on Sunday? For whatever reason, they didn't get to it on Shabbos, they only got to it on Sunday. So when are they going to swap out the Lechem Aponim? The Hiktir es Abazichem b'Shabbos Psula. And then, when did they burn the frankincense, they were supposed to. So if they do that the following Shabbos, it's actually going to be possible, right? The first step in swapping out the lechem apanim and eating lechem apanim is first to burn the frankincense. The thing is that the lechem apanim needs to stay on the shulchan for 7 days. And therefore, if for whatever reason they were only able to swap out the lechem apanim and the levona on Sunday, then you're going to be unable to swap it out the upcoming Shabbos, because it'll only be 6 days, not 7 days. So Kate said, so what do? You wait until the following Shabbos, 13 days later. Kilu, 13 days after the lechem apanim and the levona were put on the shulchan. Because even if the lechem apanim remain on the shulchan for a long time, it's fine. It's not possible, Lina. As it is, it stays on the shulchan at least a week. At least a week. I think actually a week, right? It can be baked at least. Anyways, fine. As it is, right? It's not going to be possible, Lina. It stays on the shulchan in the heichel all week. And therefore, okay, if for whatever reason it was only swapped out on a Sunday, and therefore you can't swap it out the upcoming Shabbos, so then swap it out the Shabbos after that. Okay, so it'll be on the shulchan for 13 days. It's okay. But Vamai, why is that okay? Hasam Nami, should we make a Gzeira Lema? Let's say Gzeira Shemayomu. Anybody who sees that the Lechem Apanim is spending so much time on the shulchan, people might say Mafkidim B'chli Sharis, that wow, that's a great hack. That's a good thing to know. That to avoid something being possible Lina, you could just put it in a klisharis. After all, the lechem apanim seems to be on the shulchan for way too long. Usually it's on the shulchan for 1 week. Here it's on the shulchan for kamat 2 weeks. And doesn't seem to be any issue of Lina, of becoming puzzle. That must be a great hack, that to avoid Lina, just put something in a klisharis and it'll prevent Lina. But that's not true. But shouldn't we be concerned that people are going to draw the wrong conclusion? So meaning, if over here, when it comes to the measures, we have to make this gezerah, that we can't just treat the overflow as chulin, because people might think that things from a klesharis can become chulin. But over here, we should also make a gezerah that people might think that something that's on a klesharis or in a klesharis, like the bread on the shulchan, can get around lina. To which we say, pnim achutz karamis. You're asking a kasha. These are apples and oranges, because where is the shulchan? The shulchan's in the heichel. It's a closed area. Very few people know what's going on what's happening in the heichel. As opposed to the measures, right? The things being measured in a more public area, in the azara, for menachos, for wine. Things are happening in the azara, and there people are seeing, and there people can see what's going on. Wait, why are they using that flour for chulin after the fact? So people can make the wrong conclusions when it comes to the measures. When it comes to the lechem apanim, there isn't really much of concern, because that's happening in the heichel. Panim lav kuli amayade chutz kuli amayade. When it comes to the lechem apanim that's in the heichel, very few people know that the lechem apanim was there for so long. However, when it comes to the measures, people will know, and people can draw the wrong conclusion. Tananasam, we learn in a Mishnah in Shkolim, Moser nichasim lekait, moser nisachim lekait samizbeach, that the leftover, the extra nisachim, are for the kait samizbeach. That of course, whenever there were no korbanos to be offered on the mizbeach, so there was a fund, there were donations, and that fund would fund korban olas to be offered on the mizbeach, so that there should always be korbanos being offered on the mizbeach. So we learn in Masechta Shkolim, most in nisachim, that the extra nisachim would be donated for the Kayetz HaMizbeach fund. My most in nisachim, what are these most in nisachim that were donated? Reb Chia Bar Yosef Amar Beirutze Midos. Reb Chia Bar Yosef, it's taka the Beirut Midos. You see, this is why I went with the Rambam Shita and with the Rashi on top. I understand it better this way, that it's the overflow of the Midos, that it's pumped this stuff. That what did you do with the, right? If you have all this flour that was overflowed, or this oil that overflowed, or whatever, so what do you do with it? So you can use it for you could donate it for the Olas Kaisim Mizbech. I assume it means that you would sell it, and then, one second, I assume it means that you would sell it and then use its proceeds for the Kayetz HaMizbeach. Well, Shekonim Olas. Yeah, I assume that that's what it means. Okay. Anyways, yeah, I assume that you'd be able to, I guess, be poda. I assume that that's what's happening. You'd be poda either this, wine or oil or flour, and then that money can go towards the fund. What the heck was that? That was just light. Yeah, I'm not so used to light. All of a sudden, there's a flash of light. I'm like, whoa, what is that? And it says, oh, it's just sunlight. Akoponim. So fine. Okay, fine. So those extras would go towards the Kaiser Mizbech. If we're saying the surface tension thing, I don't really know how the surface tension can be used for the Kaiser Mizbech. But anyways, fine. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, it's like we learned in another Mishnah in Masechta Shkalim. So basically the treasury, the temple treasury, they would make deals with local merchants for flour, for oil, for wine, to supply the Beis HaMikdash. Said it should be available for people to buy. Well, I guess it would be available for the Korbanos, and I think also for people who need it to be able to buy it. So right, there was I think in the Beis HaMikdash there was a Lishkas HaChosamos. I think in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Lishkas HaMoked, in the it was called the Beis HaMoked, I think. I'm learning Masechta Talmud now. So in the Beis HaMoked, there's a room kind of half in the Azara, half outside of the Azara, and there were 4 chambers in there. One of them, I believe, was called the Lishkas HaChosamos, and there, if you wanted to bring a korban, so let's say you wanted like nisachim or something, flour, I think you would go there, I think you would pay, then they would give you like a receipt that you could then go and get what you want. Anyways, so the more on that as I learn more about it, and we're going to get to Masechta Talmud before we know it, in about a year probably. It's going to be mamish at the end of Shas. Anyway, like right before Nida's mamish is the last Masechta, right before Masechta Nida, pretty much. Now, what were we saying? So the temple treasury made deals with local merchants. People could provide them with flour. People could provide them with wine, oil. And they would negotiate a deal. In this Mishnah that we're about to read, right before that in the Mishnah, what it says is that once a month, the temple treasury would establish their prices. These are the prices that they're going to be paying this month for oil, flour, whatever it is. And for the course of the month, that was the price that would be agreed upon. So now, so if you have a flour monger, and the flour monger says, so the temple says, look, this month we need 1,200 kilos of flour. This month we need 1,200 kilos of flour. As I've said many times, I'm somewhere in between America and Israel. For this, I go with kilos. Basically, anything I buy in the shuk, I know about kilos, I don't know about pounds. Anything I buy online, I know about dollars, I don't know about shekels. Al koponim. And anyways, the temples, the Beis HaMikdash is in Eretz Yisrael anyways. We work with kilos over here. So the temple treasury says to the flour monger, we're going to need 1,200 kilos of flour. We're going to need 1,200 kilos of flour for this month, let's say. And over the course of the month, I guess. And the flour monger says, okay, at the moment, $100 gets you 400 kilos of wheat. Therefore, you want 1,200 kilos of wheat, that'll be $300. However, over the course of the month, the price fluctuates, and now the price of wheat has gone up. And now, $100, I think I had said got you 400 kilos, right? Now $100 only gets you 300 kilos. So the flour monger's instinct is going to be, let me go back to the treasurer and renegotiate. Because right now, that's a big drop. Right now, $100 only gets you 300 kilos. That means that instead of the 1,200 kilos costing you $300, it ought to cost you $400. So Makabel Olav, if the flour monger accepted upon himself the Sapek Slosos Me'arba to provide flour for the Beis HaMikdash, that $100 gets you 400 kilos, which means 1,200 kilos is $300. V'amdu b'shalosh, however, the price, it got more expensive, and now $100 only gets you 300 kilos, which means that 1,200 kilos is now $400. Yisapik Me'arba, he nonetheless needs to continue providing the flour at the price of $100 for 400 kilos, for $300 for 1,200 kilos. He can't come back to him and say, I need to charge you another $100. He can't do that. It's part of doing business with the temple treasury, as we're going to see in a second. Mishalosh v'amdu me'arba, and at the same time though, if at the time that he cut the deal, $100 got you 300 kilos, it was more expensive, and they needed 1,200 kilos, so it's $400. But then the price went down, and now $100 gets you 400 kilos, which means that the price of 1,200 kilos is $300. They paid $400. He's got to refund them $100. Mishalish, if it was 3, v'amdu me'arba, but it went down. Now you get 400 for the price of $100, 400 kilos for $100, whereas before it was only 300. Misapek me'arba, he needs to give them a better price of $100 for 400 kilos, i.e., they had paid $400, now it's only $300, he refunds them $100. Sheyad ektish alayona, because the temple treasury has the upper hand, it just automatically has the upper hand. It's part of being the Beis HaMikdash. You get the upper hand in the negotiations, and he has to refund them $100. What happens with that $100? Olas Kayetz HaMizbeach. It goes to the Kayetz HaMizbeach fund. Tani Kavasa de Chia Bar Yosef, Tani Kavasa de Yochanan. We have a brisa supporting Reb Chia Bar Yosef as well as one supporting Reb Yochanan. Tani Kavasa de Chia Bar Yosef, Beirutze Midos, Halalu Mahayu Osimba. And what did they do with the overflow of these measures, of the oil, of the wine, of the flour? So this is a little bit tricky to read. The thing is, the Rambam basically quotes it verbatim in the Kesef Mishnah on the Rambam. Explains it, so I'll explain it like he says. Well, if there's another korban that you can use the oil, the wine, the flour for, so you carve imo, so use it for that other korban. Ve'imlanu yipaslu. Now, if you do have another korban to use it for, and you didn't end up burning it or libating it or whatever, well then it'll become pasul belina. The imlav, if there's no other korban to use it for, mekitzin boinas hamizbeach, it will go towards the olas kates hamizbeach. So we see this brisa supporting Reb Chia Bar Yosef's approach, which is that we are talking about the beirutze midos. V'kayetz zeh ma'u, what is this olas kayetz mizbech? Olos, they are olas. Habosel Hashem v'oris l'kohanim, that the meat goes to, it's korban olah, the meat goes to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and the hide goes to the kohanim. Tani kavasa de Rabbi Yechanan, and we have a brisa supporting Rabbi Yechanan, makabel olav, the sapik slosos, a flour monger who accepts to provide flour for the Beis HaMikdash, me'arba, and at the time it was $100 gets you 400, v'amdu mishalosh, but it increased, and now $100 only gets you 300. He can't renegotiate with them. He's got to continue misapik me'arba. He's got to continue providing at the price of $100 for 400 kilos, i.e. $300, not $400 for the 1,200. Mishal is Ramdame Arba, but if initially the price was $100 gets you 300 kilos, so you paid $400 for the 1,200 kilos, but now $100 gets 400, so really the price drops from $400 for 1,200 kilos to $300. Misabik Me'arba, he's got to give them the better price and refund them $100. Sheyad Ektish al Elyona, because the hand of Ektish, the Ektish gets the better, the upper hand. V'zeu sheshaninu moser nisachim krev moser nisachim l'ketz hamizbeach, and this is what we say, that the moser nisachim, that basically the refund, right, that the treasury received goes to the ketz hamizbeach. That $100 that they are refunded, it will go towards the donation for the Kayetz Mizbeach offerings. As I suspected, we are going to stop here before the Mishnah. I guess that means tomorrow is going to be another doozy. Have a great Shabbos.